Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible come together to fulfill the story of God. I'm Abby.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Fletcher.
And today's story is about Moses.
Moses.
For the first time, one of the biggest characters in the entirety of the Old Testament.
This is true. We've touched like every character around Moses, just not Moses.
Actually, Moses himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys get a deep insight to who Moses was because, no, I'm just joking. We got to talk about him, though.
That's it. So, question. Got to start with a question. Who would you be shocked to see run for prime minister?
There's so many.
Yes, there are. Is this because Moses was like the leader and we're like, he's an unexpected?
Unexpected leader.
Okay.
So, who would you be shocked to see run for prime minister?
Okay.
For this Canadian show, it's the
It has
leader
to be
of Canada.
Canadian. Yes, they have
All right,
to
I'm
be.
going before you guys.
Go for
not
it.
Only would I be
we're
shocked,
still thinking.
I think maybe I would be excited. I don't know.
Oh, no.
The Biebs.
I was thinking
I'm
about
all
him.
about Justin Bieber. Do it, man. His newfound faith. He's got
I don't think it's
clout with
newfound.
the young. Well, no, he began
introducing.
reignited
Yeah,
faith,
there you go.
and he's got clout with
He
the
acquired the
younger
fire.
ones. Yeah,
The Biebs.
the Biebs.
Would you vote? I think I'm going to go along a similar line. You know how
Time out. Every time he makes a mistake, he could start. He could address it by saying, "Is it too late now
to say sorry?" Wow.
Oh, my gosh.
I don't have a pun to go with mine, but Arnold Schwarzenegger ran for, governor of California, and he was governor. I think he's running for president. I don't know. I'm going to go with another actor, Ryan Reynolds, the symbol of Canada.
I thought about him too, but I was specifically going to say Deadpool.
My
You said
kids-
non-fictional characters.
and
It has to be Ryan.
To be honest, I'd far rather Ryan Reynolds than Deadpool.
Fair enough.
My
I think he
kids-
could win, honestly, with the political climate of Canada.
Yeah.
Celebrities do well.
Yeah, my kids actually are talking about, like, Nathan cheers for the Maple Leafs with me, but now that there's talk of Ryan Reynolds becoming an owner of the Ottawa Senators,
There we go.
He's like, oh, Dad, I'll cheer for Ottawa.
There you
I'm like,
go.
no, I'll disown you,
It's
but
true. Okay, I'm going to go along the same lines, and I'm going to go with Avril Lavigne.
all right.
Oh, women prime minister,
Yeah.
Avril Lavigne. Punk
emo.
prime minister, Avril Lavigne.
Toys lie.
Yeah. What an obscure Avril Lavigne song you picked. It's a good one, though.
Yeah.
I was thinking Skater Boy,
Yeah.
but
That would have been more-
okay.
Yeah, but I feel like
She didn't wanna-
Boys Lie is a better campaign slogan.
That would, she'd probably be
Running against all men,
right?
yeah.
Exactly.
She walks on stage and it's like the song starts playing.
Amazing. All right, let us know who you would be shocked to see run for prime minister. Although what we've talked about being shocked is more who we'd like to see run for prime minister.
Mine would be
but
shocked.
It would be shocking for
any of them. Ryan Reynolds could make a lot more money as an actor than
right.
again as the
That's right.
Canadian prime minister.
So let us know. Send us an email. Drop a line on our Instagram. And we'd love to hear from you. And of course, as always, we do encourage you to read the stories for yourselves to get the whole picture of what is going on. And today's story takes place in Exodus. So we left off last week talking about the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, and that is Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. And this week we're jumping a couple of 100 years forward and moving into a new book of the Bible in Exodus. And Exodus is also traditionally written by Moses during Israel's wanderings, which happen sort of after the main event of the book of Exodus, while they are in the wilderness. But since last week's episode, Jacob's son Joseph was sold into slavery in Egypt, and we see that he later saved his family from famine by becoming very powerful and bringing his family with him into Egypt. And there's a great redemption story that's packed in there as well. And his family ends up staying there until there's a new Pharaoh who the Bible tells us did not know who Joseph was. And he ended up coming into power, and he enslaved the Israelite people. So we pick up the story with the Israelites being enslaved to the people of Egypt.
In Egypt, yeah. There's a cool thing that I read, and it was basically just talking about Egyptian history and what's going on there, and how there was these different pharaohs, but from different regions. So there was pharaohs who ruled in the north and the south, just in the north, just in the south. And so during this time period, there's actually a lot of changing of dynasties and a changing of power. And so it's not hard to believe that, okay, this pharaoh got kicked out and now it's a whole new dynasty, whole new family. Doesn't know that Joseph was an influential person with this other pharaoh. Yeah. So it's an easy thing to believe. It's like, okay, new king in town. We're not going to respect the old king's high-ranking officials, right? Right. So anyway, the date of the Exodus, another hotly debated topic. There's two, the most common dates are being the 1500s BC and the 1200s BC. Once again, go look into the debate if you're interested. You'll learn a lot about, archaeology, history, and all that sort of thing. If you want to get... Well, Jay and I find it interesting. Might be boring to some other people. Anyway, if you take an early date a later date of the 1500s, it puts you in the second intermediate period of Egypt. And if you take the closer date, it's of 1200, it puts you in the New Kingdom of Egypt.
Yeah, so as we've said, the Israelites lived in the land of Goshen, which was in the Nile Delta region of Egypt.
In modern-day Egypt, of course.
Egypt.
As always.
And Moses ran away and went to Midian, which is next to the Sinai Peninsula in modern-day Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Arabian Nights.
Ooh. Saudi Arabian Nights, yeah. There's a theory that Aladdin took place far in the distant future.
I've heard that theory, actually.
Because, the genie makes all these references to pop culture in the 20th and 21st century, and, he's looking back, and it took... Anyway, that has nothing to do with today's story.
Absolutely nothing to do with it.
Or does. No, I'm just joking. So, the Israelites have moved to Egypt, and they've started to multiply, and they became this large nation, this large people. And the Egyptian pharaoh, who, of course, we know didn't know Joseph and what he did for Egypt. And... he came up with this idea. He's like, these people are becoming way too powerful, way too numerous. We got to control this before somebody rebels, and then they end up joining the fight, and we get overthrown. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to enslave them. We're going to put these taskmasters over them and just put them to work on this grueling, brutal projects. So they enslaved them, put these masters over, and they started making Israelites build a bunch of cities. And in the Bible, it lists what cities they built and all these different things. But they were under this hard labor of slavery to keep them in check. Yep. Essentially, they even actually started putting these restrictions on Israelites having children. And what they did is they'd throw all the male babies in the Nile, but you can keep all the females. So they were keeping the numbers of the people in control. There's actually a story in, I want to say, chapter 3 or chapter 2 of Exodus where the midwives of Israel are like, they come out too quickly. Yeah. We can't even get to them. They give birth so quickly because the midwives obviously didn't want to kill the babies. But read that story. That's pretty cool too. Anyway, so where our story starts now is with an Israelite woman who ends up giving birth to a baby boy, and she's from the tribe of Levi. And of course, baby boys, big no-no. You can't have those. So she hides the baby to protect him. And after 3 months, she's like, I'm about to get caught. There's no way I can keep hiding this baby. So she builds this basket and, waterproofs it and puts it in the reeds in the Nile River to hide him. And then she sets her daughter to watch over and to make sure, see what happens to the boy.
Interesting note on that. I've just recently learned that the word that is used for basket in this account in Exodus is actually the same word that's used for the ark that Noah built. Cool. And so this saving through the water, protecting from the water, this idea of the ark, the Barrie, I think is same word, and only used in these instances.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is the Pharaoh's daughter finds him in the reeds and takes him in and raises him as her own. She sends the baby to be nursed by one of the Hebrew women, which happened to be his mother. But when he was old enough, the Pharaoh's daughter raised him, named him Moses, and took him in as his own and raised him as an Egyptian.
Another interesting tidbit there is that, so he was named by an Egyptian woman, given the name Moses, which has the Hebrew meaning drawn out of, and again, like this connection with water, and it's a foreshadowing of him saving, or being a part of saving his people drawn through the water. Mm-hmm. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So now Moses has grown up Egyptian, but he still knows that the Hebrews are his people. And one day he's watching the Hebrews work and slave away, and he noticed this Egyptian man beating a Hebrew. Mm-hmm. And Moses went and confronted them and said, why are you doing this? And looked around, nobody was there. And he ended up killing the Egyptian man, and then he buried him in the sand and ran away. Yeah. So the next day, Moses went again to watch the Hebrews working. And then he saw 2 Hebrew slaves fighting. And he goes up and he goes, why are you fighting your brother? Why are you fighting your companion? What are you doing? And they respond, who made you lord over us? Who made you prince? What are you going to do? Kill me like you killed that Egyptian guy?
What? You saw that?
And Moses is like, oh no. They know. Pharaoh's going to know. I'm caught. And so he runs away, gets out of there, and flees to the land of Midian, like Abby said. And if you want to look on a map, pull up Egypt and the land of Goshen, which is in the Nile Delta region, and pull up Midian, which is in Saudi Arabia, and you can see how long a distance. So he's like, okay, I'm not staying anywhere near Egypt. And he got away from all the Egyptian colonies. There's nothing in Midian. There's like farmers and herdsmen.
Running and Forrest Gump.
Exactly, yeah. And then he got a smiley face on his shirt.
That's right.
No, different movie. This one's Prince of Egypt.
That's right. That's right.
So yeah, he goes to the land of Midian, and he ends up just becoming a shepherd there, and he ends up finding his wife and his father-in-law, who we talked about, I think, in season 2.
Yeah.
Season 2.
Yeah,
Zipporah and Jethro.
Yep.
And they have children, and he lives there for 40 years, and he's raising these flocks of animals. Excuse me. And one day, again, he lived there for 40 years, so he's spending his life there. He's thinking, this is my life now. I'm no longer this Moses guy from Egypt. I'm now from Midian. I'm a herdsman. This is all I'm going to be. Until one very special event happens, and that's called the burning bush.
Yeah.
So Moses is in the wilderness, and he comes upon this bush, and it's on fire. This tree is on fire, and it's not being consumed, was the thing that really shocked him.
Yeah.
And so he approached the bush, and then we hear that he hears from God. And we're actually going to read that. Let me pull it up. So Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why this bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. He said, here I am. And then he said, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for this place or which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh. And then he goes on, and there's a whole discussion between them. But essentially, Moses is called out of this wilderness, out of this isolation that he's been in for 40 years, back to where he came from, back to save his people from Egypt in the name of God.
Yeah.
Ooh,
in a very unlikely way.
Absolutely. Not only was he the unlikely candidate in this scenario, but also in an unlikely way.
Right.
Right. We want to answer how this season's topic kind of comes into play, and it's unlikely people. So the first thing is that he wasn't even supposed to be born. He was born to a death penalty, right? Yeah. All the Hebrew men were supposed to be killed as soon as they were born, and in this crazy turn of events, he was actually saved and spared.
Yeah, placed in an ark.
Placed in an ark,
right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. And then, raised then in kind of I put up air quotes here, in enemy territory, right? Like he was actually raised in an Egyptian household, which Also, would have given him, well, he gave him a great deal of education and sophistication, which he then later tries to say to God, I don't have. I don't have the qualifications that I need and all this stuff. Meanwhile, he actually did. He was the right person for the job because of where he was raised. But yeah, he was raised by Egyptians with this kind of dual citizenship. He is Hebrew, but he's not with his people. He's raised in this Egyptian household.
And not only that, just he's technically a foreigner to the Hebrews. He feels like one. Like that's how they talk to him in the scenarios. And he was meant to die. He also is a murderer and run away, and he's in exile essentially for 40 years after killing someone, and he's run away and basically given up. Right, this is what I'm going to go do. I'm going to go be a shepherd out in the middle of nowhere, keep myself safe, and live there.
So he's got no people, no real identity, no sense of identity.
No sense of identity. And any identity that he did have, he is now lost and given up to be basically a Midianite living over there with his family, minding his own business. And that comes in, I guess, to the next section. And the unlikely scenario that Moses was chosen in is God appears to him in this bush. And that's a crazy way for God. Like, it hasn't been described how Abraham saw God, or we know Jacob met a man, which is kind of more normal. We're used to meeting people, but God appearing to him and saying, this is who I am, and this is my name, and appearing to you in a bush. Yeah. Very crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how does this story fulfill the rest of the story of God throughout the Bible?
Yeah. Well, and I think as we look at all of the unlikelies of Moses, and he even tries to use some of them against God in being used, we see this really important principle in this burning bush episode that we have. And I've spoken about this on a Sunday morning, where the thing that catches Moses' attention is that this bush is burning, but it's not consumed. That doesn't make sense for him. And there's a really important truth about God that's actually being communicated in that happening and taking place. And that is that, like, in this instance with the bush is not actually contributing to the fire. It's all the work of God. And so Moses turns around and he sees this, and he's caught off guard by it. But what God is actually saying to Moses is, you actually have nothing to contribute. Your attempts to do things for me in saving the life of the Hebrew by killing the Egyptian, like trying to release your people from bondage in your way, no good.
It's failed over and over.
It's failed. Yeah, you have failed over and over again in your own strength. But here's the thing: all you need is me. All you need is my strength and my resolve to see things through. And so Moses realizes that he has nothing to contribute to the work of God other than to do what God has called him to do.
And then, well, you look at the rest of the story with that in mind, right? You go read Exodus, and what is the thing that gets them out of Egypt? It's not Moses and going to talking to Pharaoh. It's God using his power, and Moses showing Pharaoh, this is God's power. And eventually, because of God, not because of Moses, they are led out of Egypt. And then again, if you go even further into Exodus, the reason Moses isn't allowed in the promised land is because he goes, look, I'm going to strike this rock and water's going to come out. He tries to use his own power, and that's the exact same thing.
This worked before, and now let me do it.
Let me do it again. So Moses' own downfall was trying to use his own strength. So relying on God's strength is a huge motif in this whole story.
Preach it, brother.
Preach it.
There we go. Well, I guess that sums up today's episode. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.
Bye for now.